In today's video, we're gonna rank the 10 most beloved Brendan Fraser movies of all time. What's up everybody, your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and before we get started, I just wanna let you know this ranking is not based on my opinion alone. And I know what you're saying, how could you possibly know what the most beloved movies are of anything? Well, through the power of the internet and some pretty basic math, I was able to look at what movies both grossed the highest in box office and had the most overall reviews online. So if we can kind of extrapolate from that, we can figure out that these are the ones that most people are watching. And I don't know about you, but I tend not to watch movies I hate all that often. So if that logic sounds reasonable to you, and if this kind of video sounds like something you might be interested in, maybe consider subscribing. Also, definitely let me know in the comments below which of these movies have you seen and which ones have you not even heard of. Because I'll be honest, coming in at number 10 is a movie that I didn't know anything about until I started putting together this list. And that is the 1994 comedy Airheads. Airheads was directed by Michael Lehmann, who you may know from directing Heathers and Hudson Hawk. And it has a ridiculous cast. Hold on, I've got it here. You have, of course, Brendan Fraser. Then there's Steve Buscemi, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, Ernie Hudson, Michael McKean, Judd Nelson, Michael Richards, Amy Locane, and Joe Mantegna. It is a ridiculous cast for a movie that I think wasn't that popular, but hey, popular enough to make the list. Airheads tells the story about a pretty loser band that is trying to get a record deal, and in the process, they end up accidentally holding up a radio station. Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be necessarily any kind of a highbrow humor movie, but from watching it, it was definitely enjoyable. You get this incredible cast of characters, and it also doesn't overstay its welcome, which I think is a strong point of a lot of the Brendan Fraser comedies in the 90s. They run for an hour and a half. You get in, you get out, you enjoy yourself, you get a laugh, you see some people being really dumb, and you just have a good time. And really, that is what this movie is. It is a vehicle for all of these great 90s comedy actors to kind of just show off for a little while. I definitely enjoyed it. I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever made, but it's worth checking out if you get a chance. All right, coming in at number 9 is a 2003 live action / animation comedy called Looney Tunes Back in Action. Kind of like what you probably remember with movies like Space Jam or Roger Rabbit, this is a crossover between having animated characters on screen and live action actors at the same time. The movie was directed by Joe Dante, who is also known for bringing you Gremlins and Gremlins 2, which should kind of give you an idea of the quality of film that you can expect here. Not to say at all that those are bad movies, but it's just not something that should be taken too seriously, I think. In Looney Tunes Back in Action, you actually also have a pretty crazy cast. There's Jenna Elfman, Timothy Dalton, Joan Cusack, Heather Locklear, Steve Martin, and the wrestler Goldberg. In the movie, Brendan Fraser plays a stunt coordinator / actor whose father goes missing, who turns out to be Timothy Dalton, who is a spy. It's a really, really weird movie and doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'll be honest, I didn't really enjoy it too much. It was a little too zany for me, which I guess kind of goes hand in hand with being a Looney Tunes movie. But for me, it was just over the top and nonstop in a way that was just grating. So if I was giving you a full-on review of this movie, I would say it was something that I didn't particularly enjoy all that much, but maybe something that you will. And clearly it was popular enough to where it's coming in at number 9 on this list. And now coming in at number 8 is another movie that, again, I did not know of until I started putting together this list. And that is the 2008 adventure fantasy film based on a book called Inkheart. Inkheart tells the story of Brendan Fraser, who is a silver tongue, which basically means that anything that he reads that is written can come to life, which is a dope concept. Apparently the book was very, very popular. The movie didn't receive great reviews, but I'll be honest with you, it is such an interesting concept. I think it's something that you should definitely check out. A lot like the other movies on this list, this one also has a great cast. In addition to Brendan Fraser, you have Paul Bettany, Helen Mirren is in this movie, and check this, Andy Serkis playing a live action role as opposed to being in some kind of a motion capture suit, and he is fantastic. The movie really circles around Brendan Fraser's character, and you have Andy Serkis playing the bad guy who came out of a book and has since kind of figured out what Brendan Fraser is capable of, so he's trying to use him to build wealth and take over the world and all that typical villain stuff. All in all, a really interesting concept based on apparently a very successful book and one of the later roles that Brendan Fraser would do before going on his hiatus. Now, before we move forward, I do want to let you know a lot of these movies are really hard to find streaming online. As we get into ones that are available on streaming services, I will be sure to let you know. And if you're looking to pick up any of these movies on Blu-ray, I will link to everything I can find in the description below. If you watch this channel, you know I'm a physical media fan, so I wanted to make sure that you guys know where you can get all of these movies. Also, if you use the links in the description, it helps out the channel a bit, so it's just a good way for us to help each other. All right, coming in at number 7 is a 1999 romance comedy directed by Hugh Wilson, who brought you The First Wives Club and Police Academy, and that is the Brendan Fraser, Alicia Silverstone movie Blast from the Past. Blast from the Past also stars Christopher Walken as Brendan Fraser's dad, Sissy Spacek, and Dave Foley. I'm telling you, as I'm making this list, Brendan Fraser really was one of the kings of the late 90s, early 2000s 90-minute comedy movies. And just like with all the other movies on this list, he is fantastic in this one. The story revolves around Brendan Fraser and his parents, and it begins before he's born. It takes place in the 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. His dad is kind of a prepper who is played by Christopher Walken, of course, and he builds this underground bunker. There's a misunderstanding where he thinks a nuke is about to go off, so he takes his family into the bunker, and then 30 years later, I believe, he sends his son back up to see if the Earth has kind of rebuilt itself. Now, of course, there was no actual nuke that went off, and so what happens there afterwards is just where all the comedy is. It's a really funny and kind of simple fish out of water movie that I really enjoyed. And I'll let you know, this one is actually streaming on Hulu. So if you have Hulu, you should be able to check it out there. Otherwise, again, of course, I will link to all the physical media in the description below. All right, coming in at number 6 is one that I am definitely familiar with, and that is the 1992 comedy Encino Man. Encino Man was the directorial debut of Les Mayfield, who would go on to direct a number of movies that you probably know. There's Miracle on 34th Street, Flubber, Blue Streak, which I just so happen to have here. Don't ask why I have this at my desk. It's fine. And a few other movies in the early 2000s. Now, of course, if you have not seen Encino Man, clearly we were raised very differently. It is an absolute classic that I swear was on TV just constantly in the late 90s. In addition to Brendan Fraser in Encino Man, you have Pauly Shore and Sean Astin. That's right, Samwise Gamgee. Also, I feel like that's very telling. When I say Sean Astin, what is the first movie that comes to mind for you? I think this is like a generational thing. For me, it will always be Samwise. And in Encino Man, Sean Astin and Pauly Shore accidentally unearth a caveman that has been frozen in a block of ice. He thaws out and then is revealed, of course, to be Brendan Fraser, and he has to adjust to living in Encino, California. I love explaining what these movies are about because each and every one of them is so ridiculous. But this one right here is an absolute classic, an absolute throwback, and one of my personal favorite Brendan Fraser movies. All right, we are now breaking into the top 5 of your favorite Brendan Fraser movies of all time. And if you're enjoying this video, please drop a like on it. And if you want to see more videos just like this, consider subscribing. All right, coming in at number 5 is the 2000s fantasy rom-com movie Bedazzled. Now, the reason I'm unsure of saying fantasy because yes, this movie is a fantasy film, but the story itself is kind of odd. It's basically a comedic version of the Faust legend, which is probably taking this way too seriously than it needs to be. But in short, Brendan Fraser is trying to get a girl, he's a super nerdy character, and he ends up finding Elizabeth Hurley, who is playing the devil, and makes a deal with her for his soul to get 7 wishes. And as you might expect, the wishes do not go exactly as he intended them to. Bedazzled was directed by the late, great Harold Ramis, who of course played Egon in Ghostbusters, but has directed a number of really great movies over the years, including National Lampoon's Vacation, Groundhog Day, which I know is a great movie, but it's one that be honest, I don't really like. I know it's weird, it's a classic, everybody loves it, but it's just a movie that when I was a kid, I didn't get it, and it kind of just stayed that way. And then, of course, he also directed the Analyze This and Analyze That movies, which I think were very popular as well. Now, fun thing about the movie Bedazzled, I'm gonna go ahead and say it, I think this is one of Brendan Fraser's strongest acting roles. Now, hear me out, okay? I know it's a comedy, I know it's a silly story, but actually, through the movie, he ends up playing a bunch of different characters that are very, very different from one another. Now, of course, they're all comedic characters, but he plays them all so well. Honestly, it's like a cool, fun acting exercise that he gets to do throughout this one. All right, here we go. Coming in at number 4 is another childhood classic of mine, and that is the 1997 movie George of the Jungle. And really, why haven't we gotten more George of the Jungle movies since this? I think there was a sequel at one point, but I think it was probably straight to video. But this is definitely a franchise that they could totally reboot right now. If they did, I'm curious, who do you think would be a good George of the Jungle at this point in time? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. For those that don't know, maybe you young ones out there, George of the Jungle is basically a spoof on Tarzan. Again, George of the Jungle came out in 1997 and is directed by Sam Weisman and stars Brendan Fraser, Leslie Mann, Thomas Hayden Church, and John Cleese. Again, this is another one of those movies that I absolutely loved as a kid and is not necessarily a big critically acclaimed movie, but if you were a child of the 90s, then this movie was made for you. They really just take all of the aspects of Tarzan that are completely absurd and flip them on their head. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me a little bit of another 90s movie called Jungle to Jungle. If you've seen Jungle to Jungle, let me know in the comments. There are definitely some similarities between the two movies. All right, now we're dropping into the top 3 of the list. Let me know your guesses for what number 1 will be. But I'll tell you, coming in at number 3 is a 2008 fantasy adventure film called Journey to the Center of the Earth. Not only is this based on the Jules Verne novel, it actually references it throughout the movie. It's a really interesting one. There was a sequel that came later starring The Rock. I haven't seen that movie, but I suspect it's not as good as the one that we received here. In Journey to the Center of the Earth, Brendan Fraser plays a scientist whose brother goes missing searching for, I think it was a particular fault line. Several years later, his brother's son is sent to visit with Brendan Fraser, and they end up going on an adventure together. Also, fun fact, the son in this movie, little baby child, is played by Josh Hutcherson, who of course you might know from The Hunger Games playing PETA. And he's actually really good in this movie. I want to say he's pretty young, maybe around 15 or so. Of course, this is all before he took off with The Hunger Games. But they end up going on an adventure to, I believe it was Iceland, and throughout that they find themselves falling through a cave and they end up in the center of the earth. Even though the movie's a little bit older now, it came out in 2008, which is what, 14 years ago? The CG, all of the elements that they use in this, all the special effects look really good. In fact, the movie was directed by Eric Brevig, who is known primarily as a visual effects guy. All in all, Journey to the Center of the Earth is a wonderful family film. When I think about something that both parents and kids can enjoy together that has action, it has comedy, and it's got heart, definitely this movie. Okay, here we go. Coming in at number 2 is a movie that may surprise you. We're taking a bit of a left turn here, and that is the 2004 drama Crash. As if there wasn't already enough controversy about this movie winning various awards. If you were around in 2004, you know that Crash won the Oscars and there was a whole hullabaloo about people thinking that it didn't deserve to win. Wherever you stand on either side of that argument, you have to admit it is a good movie, and Brendan Fraser really stretches his acting muscles in this one. It's kind of hard to explain what the movie's about because it follows a bunch of different characters, but all in all, I would say it's a movie that explores our inherent biases and the societal expectations of each of us based on our class or culture or ethnicity. It's a really kind of complicated and involved movie, to be honest. The movie was written and directed by Paul Haggis, who is also known for writing and producing, I believe, $1 Million Baby, which won the Oscar the year before. And this is another one of those movies that has a completely ridiculous cast. Hold on, you've got Sandra Bullock, Don Cheadle, Matt Dillon, Jennifer Esposito, Brendan Fraser, Terrence Howard, Ludacris, Thandie Newton, and Ryan Phillippe. This is a star-studded, completely stacked cast. And although the movie can be kind of hard to watch at times, it is really good. It is something that I feel like everyone should watch probably at least once in their life. And although it may be a little heavy-handed, it does open your eyes to different perspectives. And of course, Brendan Fraser, he plays, I think he's the district attorney in the movie, married to Sandra Bullock, and his kind of arc is that he's wrapped up in this whole spectacle of trying to do his job, but then at the same time trying not to appear as if he's biased in any way. It's a lot more involved than that, but you'll have to watch the movie to really understand everything that's going on. So if you're looking for a Brendan Fraser movie that he really gets to stretch his dramatic acting muscles in, this is the one. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to mention a couple of movies that are on streaming services right now. One, George of the Jungle is streaming on Disney+, and two, Journey to the Center of the Earth is streaming on HBO Max, so you can check them out there or in the description below where I will list all of the movies on Blu-ray. All right, were you able to guess what the #1 movie on the list will be? I don't think it's gonna be a surprise to anyone. That is the 1999 movie, The Mummy. Now, honestly, all three of the Mummy movies ranked highest on this list, so we could have gone with either one of them, but I think we can all agree the best of the three was the original. In fact, in preparation for this list, I went back and watched all three movies, and I'll tell you what, the second and third one are a little rough. The second Mummy movie is definitely much more of a little kid's movie. It follows Brendan Fraser's son, mostly, I guess, who's a little kid in that movie, and it's definitely over the top and ridiculous in some of the things that they're able to pull off. And then, of course, the third movie in the franchise does also follow Brendan Fraser's kid, except, hold on, I just realized something. In the second movie, his son has a very strong English accent, but in the third movie, he has an American Western accent. What happened there? But either way, I think the first movie is just great all around, a great action adventure comedy flick. The second one is really not that great, if I'm being honest, and is much more of a little kid's movie. And then the third movie, to me, came off as kind of a cash grab, really. I wonder where a lot of the funding in the third movie came from, because it reminds me of movies that I've seen where they get a lot of funding from China, and so they start to incorporate a lot of things that will be big for the Chinese audience, but in doing so, it kind of alienates the American audience. That's just the vibe I got from the third movie. Overall, though, still a good time to watch. Now, the first two Mummy movies were directed by Stephen Sommers, who would also be known to direct G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, which was a pretty big miss. In fact, I think that first Mummy movie might be his best movie that he's directed. And the third movie in the franchise was directed by Rob Cohen, who also directed, I believe, the first Fast and the Furious movie and Triple X. So he's definitely done a lot of action. I love the first Fast and the Furious movie, but I totally understand that it is not a great film by any means. It's just a guilty pleasure. But either way, the original Mummy movie, and to a lesser degree, the sequels, are absolutely beloved by so many the world over, and they made a ton of money in theaters. So there was no way I could deny that these movies are, without a doubt, the most beloved Brendan Fraser movies of all time. Now, of course, this list is just my list. It's based on numbers that I crunched. I want to know, though, what are your favorite Brendan Fraser movies? Let me know in the comments below. For me, if I had to pick one, I think it would be the original Mummy movie. Well, that's it, my dude. I hope you found some cool movies to check out in this video. If you have an idea for a ranking video you'd like to see me do, definitely let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I have an entire playlist right over here with every ranking video I have done so far, so feel free to jump right into there to check those out. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one. All right, be good.